Today's the day. I was originally planning to release the series premiere of My Superfan History on Sunday, September 9th, but here at Flat Squirrel Productions, we know that hesitation kills, so I decided to release the episode today. That's right, the first episode of my new Superman-themed podcast series, My Superfan History, is available right now exclusively at the My Comic Shop History Patreon page. Visit patreon.com/mycomicshophistory for instant access. Subsequent episodes of My Superfan History will follow on the first Wednesday of the month. A little bit later in this show, I will give you a special sneak preview of the premiere episode of My Superfan History, which examines the death of Superman in comics and animation. Speaking of the Patreon, a special shout out to our newest VIP patron, Dan Pritchard. Normally I thank Dan at the conclusion of each season of My Comic Shop History. Dan is responsible for the music you hear at the beginning and end of each episode, and he just came up with a terrific theme for the new Superman show as well. I remain incredibly grateful to Dan for all of his support, so thank you, Dan, as well as everyone who has joined the Patreon. And now, a quick word about our episode sponsor. This episode is brought to you in part by a family of film festivals: the Brightside Tavern Film Festival in Jersey City in March, the Point Lookout Film Festival on Long Island in April, and the Hang On to Your Shorts Film Festival in Asbury Park in May. Find them all on Film Freeway, Without a Box, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're looking to submit a film, use the Film Freeway discount code SJRBRIGHT2019 for Brightside Tavern, and SJRHOTYS2019 for Hang On to Your Shorts. In the meantime, visit iTunes or ashareduniverse.com to tune into the official Hang On to Your Shorts podcast. On a personal note, my second documentary, By Spoon, The Jay Mizell Story, played at both the Brightside Tavern Film Festival and Hang On to Your Shorts Film Festival. Both were great experiences. They're very well-run fests, so whether you're a filmmaker looking to get your work out there, or you're a viewer looking to take in some cool independent film, I really hope you'll check out these film festivals. Welcome to Beyond My Comic Shop. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. It is the conclusion of our 4-part Buying Books with Ben miniseries. Please welcome back to the show once again, Zap Comics co-owner Ben Lichtenstein.
Glad to be here.
Here we are, final episode.
This is both a happy day and a sad day.
Not final episode ever. It's so funny, we've already spoken for hours, and I feel we could talk hours and hours more about your collection buying experiences, but I hope, over the course of these 4 episodes, we've hit on some of the major areas and given people a sense of what it is that you do. So hopefully people have been enjoying that. I've really been having a great time speaking to you about your experiences dealing with these collections, because it's just incredible to me.
Good. I'm glad you're enjoying it, because I never get tired of it. So I'm glad, and I hope the other people listening enjoy it, because it's a lot of fun.
You mentioned in the last episode sort of, bidding against other buyers and, as you go about your business. One thing I was curious about, kind of my who watches the Watchmen question, right? Like the Teen Titans look up to the Justice League, but the Justice League, they look up to the Justice Society. So for you, you've been doing this a long time. You've built up your reputation. I'm sure there are a lot of dealers who look to you as an example to follow. Who are the people you look to?
Good question. Well, one of the guys that now this is going back to the 1980s, but probably the sharpest guy in back issue buying, and just both had a lot of foresight and aggressive and sharp, was Jay Maybrook of Sparkle City Comics. I never really knew him. I was like 13 years old, but he was, in the 80s, he was absolutely the sharpest guy out there as far as being aggressively buying collections, knowing how to handle people. He had a lot of little tricks of the trade, and he would hustle. Like, he would just hop in a car and just go around the country. And he was just really shrewd and had really good intuition. There's a lot of guys right now that are just run it like a real pro. Like, for example, and these are guys that are not running stores, but are just high-end dealers, like Greg Reese and Bob Storms at High Grade Comics, Dale Roberts. There's a guy, Rich Evans, at Bedrock. There's a lot of guys that I view as just are really sharp and professional. I would say growing up, as far as a comic shop owner, there was a lot of shops I enjoyed going to. I wouldn't say they were ones that I used as a model, but I would learn a little bit from each one. I wouldn't say there was any one store that I thought was really doing it right. There was a lot of stores, they would do some things right, some I didn't agree with. But as far as dealers go, like in the 80s, we mentioned Pat Milligan at Pegasus. He was a sharp dealer. There was a lot of dealers that I honestly learned what not to do from. I didn't like how they handled people, and I didn't like how they priced things. But I would say at this point in time, and I'm sure I'm forgetting, I'm sure there's other ones that if given enough time, I'll think of it. But the guys that are real sharp now, like I said, Greg Reese, Storms, Dale Roberts, there's, I know there's more. And there's also, what's pretty interesting now, there's a lot of dealers who kind of fly under the radar that are pretty big time dealers, and they prefer to keep it that way. They don't run big ads in Overstreet really. They just kind of, like there's this friend of mine, Peter, he only sells on eBay. He does auctions. He has a huge following on eBay. He doesn't have a store. Most people don't know him, but he does a very big business in back issues, and also some vintage trading cards. And there's a lot of guys like that out there that kind of fly under the radar, which is and they're usually really shrewd. In fact, most of those guys are actually, in my experience, they're smarter than a lot of the guys who really have a big, like, visible public face.
That's interesting. I mean, I wonder how something like that works, because we've talked about, the reputation that you've built up, so people know to come to you with their stuff. People know to call you if there's a collection that you might be interested in. People know that it's okay to take your checks because, they know about you. So if you are under the radar like that, how would you still be able to achieve those things?
That's an interesting point. I think what they're good at is they build up a network. In our little, I guess, business or our network of dealers, they are well known, but they're not out there on Overstreet. They don't run Google ads usually. So they're very well known in our business. I think the other thing that they're pretty shrewd about, they have little ways of getting things. For example, I'll just give an example. They'll be very, very, very connected with estate lawyers, for example. So they'll be the person, and I've tried that to varying degrees of success. So they'll be the person that an estate lawyer is going to call when they have something to appraise and or sell.
That makes a lot of sense.
It makes tons of sense, and that's something I've been trying to, and it's not as easy as it sounds, but that's something I've been trying to pursue a lot.
A little morbid, but I mean, again, it makes sense, and again, I know the way you deal with people. You're treating them fairly. You're giving them fair prices, so it's not, as if you're preying on them in their time of mourning. I mean, you could truly be doing them a service.
You know what it is? It's a fact of life, and when someone has a collection and they pass away, now they have a family who doesn't want the collection. So it needs to be sold. I mean, why throw it away? So it is morbid. And as long as you're not a total vulture about it, like I don't have it completely it's not in my personality to be a real vulture. I could probably get a lot more comics if I was willing to bend some rules. Just like, I'm not that aggressive and like pushy about it, whereas some of these guys are real pushy and aggressive. I'm just not that pushy. It's just not in my nature. So I probably miss out sometimes on things, but I have to be able to sleep with myself. Well, is that right? Sleep with myself? Sleep at night.
Live with yourself.
Live with myself. So there's just certain things that I won't feel comfortable doing. But anyway, as far as dealers I look up to, I mean, I'm sure there's more I'm not thinking of right now. But I really learned there's some guys I can talk to someone for about 10 or 15 minutes when I meet someone who's either trying to get into selling comics or does it. And I'll know in 10 to 15 minutes if they're good or if they're real shrewd or if it's going to be kind of a real struggle or kind of hopeless.
What are the tells?
You know what? You'll just talk to someone, like they'll mention how they feel about what they want to buy. Like if here's one example. If they're going to be buying stuff because they really like it and say, I feel strongly about, I want to deal in this, but that there's like no demand for that. And it's more just because they like it, but it's not what their customers want. And when you a lot of times I notice that guys want to run a business, but it's a little hard to explain. It's just they're not using the right terms or not using the right approach when they're buying things. Like they're talking about buying comics, like they'll say, yeah, well, you have to pay half the price on everything. You have to cover your overhead. But no, it's not on everything. On some things, you have to. Those really hard to get stuff, you'll pay 80%, and the real junk you'd buy for like 5% or 10%. It's hard to pinpoint an exact. It's just something when you're talking to them, you can tell they're not thinking about it the right way, and it's not going to work. And I run into that a lot. And the guys that really want to, here's a pretty good example, good little situation I think about. There's some dealers who really want to score. They want to have that story. I paid $2,000 for this, and it's worth $50,000, and they get off on it. I've talked about this before. Now, those guys are going to make, in my opinion, just really lowball offers every time, and sometimes they're going to get it. The person's ignorant or desperate or just doesn't care, and they're going to make 10 times their money or 15 times their money. But they're going to lose a lot of clients. They're going to get a bad reputation, and they're not going to get a flow of deals. So they're going to buy, say, 2 out of every 10 deals that's offered to them. But on those 2, they're going to score. I'm going to get about 9 out of 10 of what's offered to me. Occasionally, it's rare. Just once in a while, I just can't. It's not going to be profitable for me, or even break even. Some of these people are they're just not realistic. That I'm going to get 9 out of 10 deals offered to me. I'd say 9 out of 10 is probably accurate. So, but I'm not going to make that 10 or 15 times. Now, occasionally things work out later. Like, if I get, I buy a collection, I put it away and let it age like a fine wine, and then I do get 10 times my money. So some guys have a mentality. They just want to get an absolute home run. And the other guys are actually overpaying. They're treating it almost like their collection, and they're working on almost no margin where they're not going to make money. So that's just a little side note.
Those are two interesting extremes. I could see both of those being problematic.
Yeah.
On this, the note of the estate sales and just in terms of the people who are selling these collections, what sort of mix is it between people who are collectors who are getting rid of collections that they've cultivated over years versus family members who have either inherited it or a scornful spouse or child or something like that?
The vast majority is just a guy has a collection, he's moving on with life, he's downsizing. I had a period of time, I think in 2014, I don't know if it was coincidence or not, but I had this wave of guys in their like late 50s that had been downsized or were leaving, their kids. They were empty nesters. They're leaving New Jersey's taxes to go to, North Carolina. And I got a lot of deals. It was an interesting little trend, and I really noticed it. And they were always, men, age 55 to 60. They were downsizing, empty nesters, and they were selling. That's most of the collections I buy. They're not all that age, but that's most of the collections. The collections where it's, a family member passed away or a divorce are actually not that common. Maybe it's a handful. One of my, I guess I'll jump around again. One of the collections which also really took off for me, what was a pivot in around 2012, I got a call from this man who actually lived right in Wayne. Now, I hope I get this right. I think it was his son passed away. Maybe he was about 60. They called another store, and the store says, I'll give you 10 cents a book. And they called me, and they explained what years they're from, and they're mostly 70s. I'm like, well, I'll definitely pay you more than that. I mean, you may have some good stuff. And that was a great collection. I didn't know if I was going to get it because they called someone else, but that guy failed to call back, which was fortuitous. That was another collection where it was a really deep, there was a lot of multiples. It was like early Bronze Age, 1970 to 76, some Silver Age. And then some of it was in a storage unit. Then I went to their house up in Poughkeepsie, New York. That was a great deal. And it worked out. That was also one of those early ones. But that was an estate. Obviously the man passed away,
Sure.
and they had to empty out his house. And you have to be very, you have to treat. I would anyway, but you have to treat people with kindness, and
Of course.
they're going through something, but. There isn't. I don't have that in me to be like a real vulture. Like I know there's some people when they're shopping for a house, they check the obituaries, and I just don't. I don't have that in me. It's gross.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. In terms of, going through someone's collection, I mean, in many ways, it's a record of them, their life, certainly their life as a collector, as a fan.
Oh yeah.
Is that ever something that you think about? Like
a lot.
how you can get to know someone through looking at what they've acquired over the years?
Yeah. In fact, there was a collection I bought 2 years ago. It was in Jamaica, Queens. That the man passed away. I think he was fairly young, maybe in his late 40s, and the landlord was, had to sell. It was not a hoarder, but almost a hoarder situation. And you could see exactly what he liked, and he had his comics all still in the bags. Each week, you pick up your pull box, and you could see where his taste was. He was more into female characters, but it was interesting. That was one I actually that was a pretty sad one, because he had all of his personal stuff all around the apartment. That was actually that one bothered me, because you saw it was just like he had left. I guess he went to the hospital and never came back. That one bothered me.
That is sad.
Yeah.
Kind of on that, but hopefully on a more positive note, anything else that has stood out to you as you've gone through someone's collection? Whether it's, like the example that I came up with. Have you found any character-specific collections? Like this person has every single appearance of X character, like across all the titles that they appeared in, or something like that.
It definitely happens where someone's obsessed with, Wonder Woman or Swamp Thing or something. I'm trying to think of a specific. I can't think of a really good example now, but it definitely happens. And at 100%, there is focus collections where they're obsessed, where they have everything, with even things that aren't comic books. They collect like mugs and everything. I've had that. I can't think of a good example right now.
Gotcha. And then as far as the travel piece, we've touched on this, but I know you said you enjoy traveling.
Oh yeah.
Which is good, because you do a lot of it. Again, I know there's a lot that you do locally, but you are on the road. What's the farthest you've gone for a collection?
The farthest I drove, probably Detroit or Chicago. I bought collections in both those areas. I'm trying to think if I went really far south. The farthest south I've gone is maybe North Carolina. I haven't gone. I'm usually, once it gets beyond that like 9-10 hour area, I'm usually going to start to lose interest, because unless it's an absolutely massive collection, and it's going to be worth all like flying and renting a van, driving it back, I start to lose interest unless I'm absolutely sure it's good. I could probably get more collections if I was willing to like really just like fly into Denver and just look at a collection. And a lot of those I'm just a little bit afraid of, like wasting, days of my life and not working out.
Yeah.
But I've driven to Maine, and down North Carolina and out west, Detroit. I bought a decent collection in Detroit last year. It wasn't that profitable, but
probably less so, factoring in the time and the gas and all that. Are you rent a van, or do you have your own?
I rent a van. I keep toying with buying my own van, but I insurance is so expensive in New Jersey, and the maintenance. So I was actually going to buy one last year. I said, I'm just going to buy one of these new Ford Transits. They're really nice. They're great on gas. And then I'm like, you know what? It's nice just to hand it back to the rental place and let them deal with it. And if I break down, the roadside assistance. I just don't want to be bothered. So I'm renting vans a lot, and I know I should probably buy one, but I'm just kind of paranoid about having a problem.
Sure. My wife, she loves to travel, and whenever we go anywhere, she's a big fan of trying the local cuisine, and that's rubbed off on me now. I feel like I'm a little bit more adventurous in things that I'm willing to try.
Cool.
Where do you kind of land on that? Do you enjoy, finding stuff like that on the road?
Yeah, I really, when I can. Sometimes I'm on a schedule, and I just got to eat on the highway, unfortunately. But I really like it what I usually try to do, if I buy a collection pretty far away, let's say I go to like Erie, Pennsylvania, if I think the guy might have okay tasting food, I'll say, hey, is there anywhere local that you recommend, like a good, local like barbecue or something like that, or anything that's good? So I try and eat some decent local place that's actually good. Unfortunately, I'm kind of a lot of times when I'm on these trips, I just want to hit the road and just like zoom down the highway. But I've had plenty of experiences where, especially when I bring someone with me on a buying trip, I got to treat them right for their lunch and dinners, and I like to stop like a barbecue and have a couple beers and just like have a little. I'll basically try anything actually. If I'm in Maine, I'm gonna eat whatever. When you're gonna have lobster in Maine, right? And if I'm out in Detroit, like for instance in Detroit, I bought the collection. I was with my buddy. I said, I want to eat somewhere good. Where are we gonna eat? So he recommended this great Greek place. There's this Greek area, Detroit, Greek town in Detroit, and we had a great Greek lunch, and it was awesome. So yeah, I try to.
Nice. Is there anything that you can't really get here in Jersey that you'll be specifically excited for or specifically seek out when you have the opportunity to?
What's I think I'm a bit of a snob about New Jersey because the food. Everyone will bash New Jersey, but the food you get top-notch food here in Jersey.
You do, and going back to my wife, she's from Jersey. She's not with me today, but normally she loves when we do these Jersey store visits because it's an opportunity to get a proper hoagie.
Yeah.
Jersey hoagies.
Well, you know what? The best subs are in South Jersey, and
that's where she's from.
Oh, so she knows. Yeah, and in fact, whenever I have family in South Jersey, and that's no matter what happens, I get hoagie sub, is all. But
that's been a discussion between us because I never called it a hoagie, but
I didn't either. But I will completely. I'm a huge fan of South Jersey subs, and again hoagie, whatever you want to call it. But I'm like pretty spoiled. I think the food, and again, it's it's what I'm used to. But I think the food's the best in New Jersey. I mean, in Chicago, I had the best steak I ever had in Chicago last year. We went out we always have one big steak dinner in Chicago when we do the C2E2 show.
Nice.
So that was the best steak I ever had.
Where?
It was called Chicago. I don't know if it's a real tourist trap. Not really. It's been around forever. I think Chicago Chop House.
Okay.
I think it's called. Very good.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think about that too. I mean, living in New York, we have access to so much. The only thing, I was thinking about this recently, like the only thing that, I mean, you can get it, but it's maybe not as good or as authentic if you went to the actual place, is barbecue. I mean, obviously there are places, but that's something that,
I agree because, there is a bunch have opened up in New York and Brooklyn, and there's a good one in Hoboken now, but...
not quite the same.
No, I agree with that.
But almost anything else, good to go.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
But so anything else, any other road trip stories, anything that you encountered in your travels that you wanted to share?
Well, I usually, if it's a large deal, I mention that I bring that friend of mine who's not a comic book guy. He's just, one of my childhood friends. And we usually make a whole road trip out of it. We stop in these little towns. Like when we drove out to Detroit, we stopped in, I don't remember where it was. I think it was like Northwest Pennsylvania, and we ate at it was actually pretty decent. We ate at some restaurant there, and it's just a little town with like literally just one main street, like those one street town,
Sure.
These towns that are, I guess they're disappearing now. As far as anything really weird, nothing too really weird. I will say it's just a lot of fun just to get on the road. You're kind of thinking about the deal. You go there. I've almost never had a problem where I knocked on the door and it was like a real negative experience. Like almost every time it's turned out where the person was friendly. They were just, people in general are pretty friendly, Once in a while you run into a visit where the house is like kind of gross, like a hoarder situation where it's really dirty, and you get, this is not a travel story, but another collection. See, I'm jogging my memory now. One of the collections that really pivoted, the ramp up in back issue sales. There was a longtime customer of mine, and he was selling the house, getting divorced, and This is before the market ramped up, but I bought his whole collection. That was kind of a problem because it was really dirty. It was, but he had great stuff. I mean, and that's another collection I'm still feeding off now, and it's been like, I think it's been 10 years. And he had all these magazines, and I kind of never, touched the magazines, and now we have this whole section in the warehouse, just boxes and boxes of magazines and good stuff like Warren's, and we're horror mags, and but that one I actually hosed off in his driveway. Like I felt very, I really felt very skeeved out. I don't want to get back in the car, and he happened to have a hose. I said, would you mind if I use your hose? I literally hosed myself down because it was
that bad.
Yeah, there was a weird smell. When there's a smell, that's like a basement plus dead mouse plus cat urine plus who knows what, just bad. But as far as travel, I'll be honest, I enjoy it. Like, my wife doesn't enjoy long car rides. She goes, "How do you do it?" Oh, and I like it. I hop in the car and I view it as an adventure.
Yeah.
I want to mention a couple other
please.
Good collections. There was a collection 2 years ago. Now, let me preface by saying we get calls all the time where people tell us their comics are in mint condition. They're not, and they never are. But I get a phone call from a man in New Jersey, and he says he's going to be moving, and his comics are in mint condition. And I think he wanted $95,000, and he sends over the list. Now, he had plenty of 1970s comics and some 60s ones, but he had plenty of modern ones. And I'm like, well, a lot of these modern comics we can't pay much for. They're very common. He goes, well, yeah, but they're all in mint condition. And he's telling me this, and I'm like, well, and I'm trying to explain to him. And I almost blew it off because I'm like, well, this guy wants $95,000. I think I'm going to pay him. I'm going to offer him $35,000 based on this list. But I said, finally, I'm going to go look at it. Why not, right? He's right in New Jersey. I drive to look at it, and he was right. They were not mint, but near mint. Beautiful, like the nicest grade Bronze Age comics I'd ever seen. I'm like, wow. And he told me, yeah, I told you, when I would buy my comics as a kid, I would look at every one, the whole stack, and I would only pick the perfectly centered ones. So I'm like, wow, these are really nice. And he had some stuff in there that turned out to be 9.8, like Amazing Spider-Man 129, 9.8, Batman 251 with the Joker cover by Neil Adams. Incredible stuff. And I'm like, wow, this stuff is nice. And if I buy this, I'm going to have to get a lot of it graded, CDC graded. And that was one of my favorite collections of all time because that was like probably the only time where someone said they were in mint condition and they turned out to be. And it turned out to be a wonderful collection. I mean, we finally haggled. I think I paid $85,000 or so. And there was this other guy who was like, who had offered him 80 and it was furious at him and it was yelling at him, but he stuck to our deal. Like the other guy says, whatever he said about me, whatever he offers, I'll beat it by $1,000. But the guy stuck to his deal. And the point of the story is people call me every single day. They tell me they have comics from the 1960s and 70s, and they're not. It's weird how I can't explain why they do this, but they are always like 65 cents or 75 cents. But they tell me they're from the 60s and 70s every time.
That's great. I mean, we used to run into that all the time at Alternate Realities. People would call or come in and say, I have really old comics. And then we would eventually see them or we'd get a list from them or something. And again, it was all stuff from 80s, 90s, 2000s. So, I mean, I'm not shocked. In that case, I'm glad that paid off. And it's interesting, too. I mean, not even near mint, but mint.
They were beautiful. And in fact, I still have a lot of them because I paid very aggressively in these. I mean, I paid up for it. And so I still have quite a few from that collection that are in a separate inventory. They're so nice, and we actually have them noted. Something that I used to have as a connection, which is really important to have like some kind of edge, meaning, I know I've talked in the past, when you have a comic store, if you just carry all the new stuff from Diamond Comics, you don't have any edge, right? When I was a kid like 16 or so, I ran into a guy who worked for, I don't know who worked for, either his relative worked for the newsstand, and the newsstand back in the day, they would return them for credit, and they're supposed to be shredded. But of course, they'd all just, go out the back door. And I didn't feel bad about it because they're not technically stolen. They were supposed to go in a dumpster. So to me, I'm saving them from the dumpster. No one's getting hurt here. So but I had that source for years. Then that one went away. And then I found a new one. And this is something which I've been pretty lucky about, which has also helped this whole back issue thing. One thing I've been pretty lucky with is finding these sources, because I had this other newsstand source. He worked for one of the big newsstand, I think Hudson News. Same thing. They were the comics that are supposed to get shredded. And he fed me them like every week. I would just fill my car up every week. And little things like that are really important to giving you that edge with back issues. Because if you're, like I said, if you're just going to sell like the stuff that's left over at the end of the month, forget it. That's boring. And if you're only going to be able to go after a few like individual issues, you're not going to get enough. You gotta find these sources with a lot of stuff.
Buying Books with Ben will be right back. But first, I am pleased to present a free preview of the series premiere of My Superfan History. Here is a piece of my chat with Alternate Realities refugee Mike San Gregorio about the death of Superman. I remember, I think I was in my parents' room on the recliner, like by the window, and sitting with my dad and him reading it to me and doing all the voices, this is the day that a Superman died, like, all that stuff. And it really just resonated with me. It made that connection. And, I was thinking about what effect does it have? Because again, I've always talked about, Death of Superman got me into comics, Death of Superman, but what does it mean when your introduction to a character is that character's death? Like, what impact does that have? So I was really thinking about it in advance of today. And I don't know, one of the things I came up with is a very common criticism, as you know, of Superman is that he's too powerful. It's too hard to write stories for him. He's not interesting because he's too powerful. He's invulnerable. Well, when the first story that you read featuring him is him dying, it's like, well, no, he's not too powerful. He clearly has his limits. So I think that's one thing. But beyond that, I think what always stuck with me the most about this story wasn't the fact that he died, but it was the fact that he was able to go the distance when no one else could. And maybe that's the same reason why Rocky resonated with me. Well, even in Death of Superman, they talk about how like weary, fighters who have gone the distance.
Bibbo is a boxer and he's in continuity.
Exactly. But that idea that Superman will be the last one standing when all the other heroes have fallen, he's the one who can go farther than the rest. I think that's probably what made an even bigger impression on me. And the fact that he was willing to make that sacrifice. I think that is what stuck with me, even beyond the actual death. So I don't know. That's what I came up with.
I think that's a very good point because upon reread, one of the things that jumped out at me the most was exactly what you're talking about, which is at no point does Superman back down. Does he stop? The 7 most powerful superheroes on the planet at the time have been taken out with very little forethought. Everyone else is going down, and he is right there, and he is not going to let a single person get hurt if he can prevent it. And you are absolutely right. This thing is a Superman story. At no point does he act out of character or anything like that. Like, you can read this and you can get a full measure of exactly what the character is. And you're right. If you read this, you're never going to think of him as being all powerful because you're going to remember the time that he died to save his friends and to save the citizens of the city he loved.
To hear the entire episode, head on over to the My Comic Shop History Patreon page and sign up. And now, the conclusion of Buying Books with Ben. I want to jump back to, again, just making the deals. You mentioned that one buyer you were bidding against who, was very upset. Do you ever find that sellers, like, you have a deal worked out and then they'll renege on you? Does that ever happen?
I've been very lucky with that. I've had that happen like a handful of times, literally maybe 2 or 3 times. I'm always a bit like paranoid about like me making an offer and then leaving and then they change your mind. So I really try and like wrap it up, which is also why I also try and do some homework in advance, like really get as much information as I can, talk to them about it. And what I do say to people a lot, that actually is pretty telling actually, because what I will do very often is before I'll make a trip out, let's say someone's in Pennsylvania, before I make my trip out there, I say, listen, I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste either one of our time. My time's valuable. So I asked them how much they're looking for. Now, some people view that as like a trap. Well, you're trying to trap them. But I do it to see if we're even remotely in the right ballpark, because sometimes they're so ridiculous and they're just going to have me go out there and, waste hours of my time, and there's no chance of us making a deal. So I always get, and of course it's information, obviously. I'm trying to buy the stuff. I want information, but I always ask them what they're looking for. Occasionally they're like cagey about it. A lot of people just don't want to do that. They don't want to feel trapped. But I try to avoid that situation, right? Where someone, you make a deal and then he thinks about it, and some other dealer comes in and says, I'll give you $1,000 more. It's happened. It's very rare, and it does get me very, very angry.
Oh, I mean, understandably.
Yeah.
So we talked about the collection you bought, 1.5 million comics, which so that was the largest quantity of books.
The largest quantity, yeah.
Okay. As far as rarest / most expensive individual book.
Yeah, I've had Action 1 and Superman 1.
Oh.
But and Batman 1. I never had a Tech 27. Unfortunately, I sold those way too early.
Wow. Well, it's funny because, in the last episode we were talking about Golden Age and how that has proven elusive. So I wasn't aware that you had your hands on those.
Yeah, the Action set I had, I think it was missing just a couple issues. When I bought it, though, the market, I think it was 1990, gosh, I don't know, 94. The market was terrible. I had no money. I mean, I was like busted, and I think I got a bunch. Oh no, you know what? It had to be later than that because they had just came up with CGC. It has to be later than that. But the market wasn't good. I flipped the Action 1 and the Superman 1 too cheap. I flipped them to a dealer. And the guy also had a big collection of World's Finest. I think 3 and up. And the Actions, I sold. I got the early ones graded, like number 4, really rare. And this is another one of my regrets because the market. I mean, I would have made like literally 8 or 10 times what I got for them, but I got them graded, and I remember I brought them to the first New York Comic Con Javits show. I don't know when that was. Yeah, so this is actually when the market was not that dead. Actually, see my. My brain is, oh no, that was it. I remember now. I got it in pieces. That's it. I didn't get the whole collection all at once. They were piecing it out. It was from like someone's grandfather. And people do this sometimes. They won't just sell me the whole thing at once. I'm like, just bring the whole thing in. We'll do it. It saves us all time. People, they have something in their head. They want to piece it out. So anyway, at the first New York Comic Con, I sold the CGC graded early Actions. I got decent money for them, but not anywhere close to what I should have. I sold the Batman 1 way too early. I don't know what I got for it. I regret that. I don't think about this much. Trust me, when I'm going to bed at night, I'm going like, God, that Batman. I don't think about it that much, but now when you bring it up, now I'm sad.
It's remarkable. I mean, it's all part of comic book history and history, but I mean those books in particular
are incredible.
That's really something.
Yeah, you know what else I had? A great collection from someone else was a Wonder Woman collection. They didn't have number 1, but they had Wonder Woman, I think 3 and up. A lot of those are really scarce. I remember this is again before the market really ramped up. I listed some on eBay, and you can always tell when books are rare when you start getting phone calls just like immediately, because the people that know the stuff, they are aggressive. And I remember I got this call from this woman who was a real Wonder Woman collector, and she like raced out from Long Island and bought some. But I've never seen some of those numbers again. I think number 6 was there. I think it's the first Cheetah. There was a lot of great stuff in there. So I haven't had every big. I never had a Cap 1. Captain. I never had that. There's a lot I've never had. I lucked out with the Batman 1, and I lucked out with those Superman books. But I'll tell you something else pretty. Some of the best stuff I've gotten is when I go and look at a collection, and there's other things there that I didn't expect and that weren't part of the collection, and they were kind of like just make a decision on the spot, and they're almost like a throw-in. A guy called me up. He had a collection, and he had Amazing Spider-Man 1, and then he had a bunch of modern stuff. I'm like, no problem. He has to move his self-storage unit. He has to clear out. He's behind on his rent. I pull up with a box truck because he got a lot of stuff. He says he had like 300 boxes. We make a deal on the comics. He goes, hey, do you also buy toys and statues? I'm like, oh, well, I guess there's room in the truck. I brought a big box truck, so I misjudged how many. You know what? Yeah, he didn't have 300. He had 150 long boxes, and then we got anyway. So I go, yeah, I guess. So he has a whole other storage unit filled to the ceiling to the front. You know when you literally can't get a piece of paper in?
Yeah.
Okay, filled. Like Steve Odo, maybe. No, maybe not. Anyway. So I go, yeah, I guess I'll do something. He goes, how much you want? He goes, listen, I need to move out of here. It's all toys and statues, just whatever. And I just did some quick math. I go, listen, I don't even know what's in there. I really don't want a lot of this stuff. He goes, just whatever you give me, I'll take it. So I gave him $1,000, I think. And, we loaded all up. And then there was all these like feather boas. Did I tell you about this?
No, I don't know.
So we realized, I think he was like a like a vaudeville or like a not a vaudeville. What a strip? What am
Burlesque?
Burlesque. That's it. Okay. I think he was maybe like a cross-dresser or something, because we keep finding all this stuff. He was really into female figures. He collected Barbies. There was tons of Barbies, tons of female figures, and like feather boas and assorted like gloves. I'm like, wow, this is an interesting group. But that one. The point of it is that one turned out to be a really great little bonus on the collection, and it was just on the spur of the moment. I gave him another $1,000, and it worked out great. But that actually has happened a few times where there was other stuff I didn't even plan on getting, and they just like had to get rid of it, and I just had to make a quick decision on the spot, and had to play it safe. And those usually work out pretty well.
What other specific deals or collections did you want to share with us?
Well, there was actually one in, I think it was 2015 or 2016. And again, I keep circling back to the Golden Age. It was probably a year before the Golden Age market just erupted. So it was probably 2015. This is an example where someone had passed away. They brought in their Silver Age books, and I paid them really strong on those. They had a Hulk 1 and other stuff. Gave them, really competitive price. They had brought them to someone else who really turned them off. They were very happy about. And then he said, they say to me, we have one more box in the car. I don't think they're any good. You want to see them? I go, sure. And it was a phenomenal box. It was a full box. It was probably about 100 books, all Golden Age and some primo stuff, like rare stuff. I'm like, wow. I said, you're not going to believe it. I'm going to give you more money for this one box than you got for the Silver Age stuff. And they're just like, what? They were totally surprised. And, to be honest, this is one of those things we talk about where I could have easily gotten it for like, $1,000. They didn't even think it was good. It wasn't on their radar. They were so fixated on like the Hulk 1 and I think Spider-Man 2 and stuff. But I explained to them, no, this is the good stuff. So they got a nice, I forget what that box was worth about 40 or 50 grand. So that was exciting. However, now I'm saying that, but if I just put that box away for 2 years, the box would have been worth 100 grand.
If you had squirreled it?
If I had squirreled it, see that? No, very good. Unfortunately, I was in turnover mode. So I'm sure there's a lot more. Like I said, I forgot. Something that I always did, even from when I first started the stores, I was always buying out other stores. Stores would fold up and, quit or for any reason. I kind of put out my name out there that I would buy out stores. And that usually worked out very well because I was usually able to buy everything, flip enough of it quick to get back what I paid, and then I would gradually milk it out. And I'll give a funny example of this. There was one store in Pennsylvania. I bought it, I think, in 1999. I think it was called Comics A to Z. Well, I know that's what it was called, Comics A to Z. We went out there with 2 trucks. We filled up the trucks. And to this day, I still have comics in my warehouse that I'm still selling that say Comics A to Z on them. So the point is, those kind of deals, usually, if you play it right, usually pay really good dividends because you're able to get back your money you paid for it. Hopefully, I'm aggressive about getting it back quickly, and then you just milk it out slowly, and that's how a lot of these deals really, pay really good dividends.
No, that's smart. I mean, yeah, it's one thing, thinking back to the old alternate realities way. I mean, it's one thing if you're just sitting on something, maybe for no reason, but if you're, if you anticipate a rise in value, or that, it would be additional revenue down the line, kind of to fill in a gap or something like that.
Right. Yeah. If you usually, like I said, it's like what we said before. It's a balancing act between you want to keep things turning over because you got to pay your bills and you want to get your money back. But then the other balancing act is where you can make really good money if you put away like squirrel. If you squirrel away the right things and you maximize them. I know a few other guys that I respect that are pretty shrewd, and they do the same thing. They buy these big collections, and they, we all have our own little term for it, but yeah, it works.
Right. So sort of the last major topic that I wanted to get at with you is kind of the market generally, but specifically how the collection buying intersects with the store, with Zap Comics. And one thing that I was curious about is just sort of the response from customers to your collection buying and the back issues that come through. Like when you get a new collection, like are people excited? Are they lined up? Are they asking you about what's coming in? Like what's kind of the vibe and the response from customers?
Usually what we do, if it's a larger collection, Corey will post some stuff on social media.
All new wall books?
Yeah, all new wall book. Yeah, you got it.
I follow.
Thank you. So Corey will post things about all new wall books, and then also we don't do it on every collection, but when I go and like fill up a box truck, we make sure to take a couple pictures of like me sitting on the boxes. And
if you're okay with that, because I do my homework, I saw a lot of this stuff. I would love to use those as the episode artwork for these episodes that we've done. I think it's a perfect representation of what we've been talking about.
You know what? There was one which I did on the spur of the moment where I'm like kind of posing almost like a centerfold model, which was, I don't know if I'm okay with that one. That one's I find in hindsight a little embarrassing.
Well, it's fun though. I mean,
but it's funny, right?
And you got to think about it in the moment, right? Like you had just gotten this collection, like you were riding that high. So even if you look back and it's like, oh, maybe I wouldn't have posed that way. I don't know. In the moment, maybe it just kind of reflected what you were feeling.
Well, we did it because we were in a silly mood. We were we opened it up, and my employee Nick, who's works for me part time now, but Nick's like, "Come on, Ben, do something funny," and that's what came to mind. Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, basically we do. It's getting a little harder to get people excited just because I buy so much stuff. I hate to say it. So it's like
people are spoiled.
Maybe they're a little bit spoiled. And also there's so much out there now on social media. There's so much stimulus to this. Everyone's posting 24/7. So people are definitely interested. When I buy a large collection, we get a lot of inquiries. We also try to take care of there's certain customers, like I said, real loyal regulars who we know are going to want that, say, Amazing Spider-Man 3, or we're going to hold those back for those, and reward those loyal customers.
A customer like that who would be interested in early Amazing Spider-Man issues, is that generally someone who's one of your Wednesday regulars and is still buying new stuff, or is it someone who's like really focused on those vintage books?
It's both of them.
Yeah.
Both, because some of these guys are only vintage, but they're great customers and they buy tons of stuff from us, not just early Spideys. And then some of them are both, are buying their weeklies, and they also love back issues. I would say there's more of like the blend, the guys that do both. But it is getting harder to stand out because everyone's getting more and more savvy with social media, and everyone's posting the hell out of things. So, we always got to up our game.
I mean, that's something, since I started on my quest to visit these comic book stores across the country for the podcast and now the documentary, I've been following all of them, and it's great prep for me. It allows me, especially when I've never been to a store before, it's a great way to just start to get a feel for what it's like and just get to see the space and everything. But I really can identify with that because that's what I see a ton of, really stores across the board. They're posting the new product that comes in. They're posting collections that they're buying. They're having customers pose with things that they're walking out of the store with, certainly events and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I could see how it would be difficult sometimes to stand out, amid that sea of stimulus.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think when Corey first started getting, and Corey handles all our social media,
very well.
Thanks. Yeah. I think he does a great job. But when Corey first started doing it heavily with Facebook, he was probably a little ahead of the curve. I think he was doing it a lot better and more than most stores. And then a lot of stores are, I've caught up to it as well they should, And so, we're always trying to figure out the best way. And I think, we talked about ZapCon. We're doing our own Comic-Con, and that's something to kind of set us apart.
Yeah. Well, of course, that happened months ago, and it was a fantastic event. It's okay. I think we can reveal to listeners that we're recording these episodes in advance, and of course they're running over the summer months. But
I forgot about that.
That's fantastic. Sticking with this theme of the customers and their interest in the back issues, I assume the answer is yes to this. But are people coming to you and saying, "Hey, can you keep an eye out for this character, this run, this issue"?
Yeah. What we do with that is where there's certain buyers that have proven that they're reliable, that if they request something, they'll actually follow up and buy it. Then there's a lot of buyers who are basically going to ask for the same stuff everyone else wants. Hey, when you get a Hulk 181, make sure to call me. Well, yeah, you and 100 other people. I mean, it isn't like I can't just shake the Hulk 181 tree and just get your Hulk 181. So the buyers that are proven like really reliable, good customers, we will really give them first shot at things and really look for stuff up to a point. Then there's a lot of people that are all talk and no follow up, and then we just kind of say, it's hard to get, which is kind of the truth. I mean, someone that only asks for the very best, like the cream of the crop, and they're not supporting us by buying other merchandise. There's no incentive for me to give it to them because I could sell it to anyone. I'd rather sell to someone who supports us.
Yeah.
So we do, I think at least we do a good job. And, we're always improving. We do a good job of giving good customer service. Like we got this one, as an example, we have a customer who's been buying every Walking Dead from us, all the back issues, and buys other stuff from us. Great customer. She and her partner are loyal, regular customers. And we got in exactly one of this really allocated, there's a new series, Oblivion by Kirkman.
Yes.
And they made this limited edition box set with a statue. We got one. I ordered 50 of them. We got one that really allocated. So in that case, we have to decide who gets it. And we had a few people ask for it, but she had asked first, and she also, is in our store every week supporting us, so she gets it.
One other thing that I was curious about is, are there specific things, again, as you're buying and selling these collections and, putting money away, are there specific things that you could point to in the store and say, my collection buying funded that?
That's hard to say because it all just kind of goes in one big, in one pot. The money just goes into the business, and depending how flush we are, if we need new back issue bins, which we just keep piecing them together. It's like a Frankenstein over there. To get really good back issue bins, or to get custom made good ones, are a fortune, and I just don't want to pull the trigger on being cheap. But I will say that when things really, like I talked about, when things had that kind of inflection point in 2011, 2012, I was much more flush, and I was able to fund a lot of things, fund more advertising, new bins for the trades. We got a new sign, and there's always, most people who run a small business, we have a whole list of, like, a wish list of stuff they want to invest in, whether we need a new computer, a new sign, a new showcases. We spent money on new showcases over there. So basically there isn't just one collection where, like, well, thank God we got that one. But I will say that the uptick in the back issue market and me getting really aggressive about it, and Corey going on Facebook, that has allowed us to fund a lot of improvements.
A moment ago, we were talking about other comic book stores there, and I believe in either this episode or the previous one, they're all blending together now. You mentioned Metropolis Comics.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not a store in the traditional sense. They're based out of Manhattan, but it's a showroom.
Exactly. They're a showroom. They run an auction operation and a website, and they're just they always want to be a very high-end dealer. They're very aggressive. They've kind of built up a good brand for themselves that if you have a major book, like an Action 1, you're going to call them. You might put it on Heritage Auction, you might put it on Comic Link, but they really build up this brand, and they're very aggressive buyers. The one partner, Steve Fischler, who's he has probably, I don't know about the most knowledge, but incredibly knowledgeable about grading and comic books in general. The other partner, Vinny, is like the face of the company, and he's really aggressive about getting out there. He's at every show, and he's networking, and he's buying, and he's very shrewd, very knowledgeable. So they are really sharp operators, and they have really strong, as far as I know, they're very strong financially, big inventory of big books.
Yeah, they will be featured in the My Comic Shop Country
Oh, cool.
documentary. So I'm excited about that. I was just curious to get your take. And then also I was wondering, kind of their model where, that's really what they're focusing on, and they have the showroom. I mean, it seems like you, and obviously having Corey and the rest of your staff, it seems like you've struck a very nice balance between having the storefront, doing the quote-unquote traditional comic shop thing, but also having this entire collection buying enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like and do you foresee continuing to have both, or would that Metropolis model be something that you would be interested in, where it's like you're really just zeroing in on the collections and the vintage books?
That's something I've thought about a lot. In the back of my mind, I view the, I mentioned earlier Greg Reese and High Grade Comics, Bob Storms and Dale Roberts. I view their model with a lot of respect because they do not have a retail storefront. They don't want a retail storefront. They've really invested in their websites, and they do a lot of conventions. They're on the convention circuit, and they're really focused on higher value stuff. And that kind of appeals to me because having a retail store, you have that, even though, I have a good team now and I don't have to be here all the time, just there's always that hanging over my head. You have the responsibility and that constant, problems and bills, and that's something which might be a relief for me to just focus solely on just buying old comics and selling old comics and not having a retail store. I will say right now I would be afraid to do that because the one thing about the store is you have that steady money coming in, and you have the visibility to get collections. Part of why I get so many collections is because I have the retail stores. And I can also sell a lot of lower price things where are not really conducive to selling online. Like, I can't sell like $5 and $3 packages online. Well, I could, but it's extremely labor intensive. It's not really cost effective. So I can sell a much wider variety of things because I have a store than they do only at websites and at shows. So I think they do very well. I don't know all their numbers, but I'm pretty good at estimating numbers, and I think they do very well, those guys. So it's a business model that appeals to me. At this point, I'm not going to, I would be afraid to do that because the money wouldn't be steady enough.
Right.
We've
spoken a number of times about market trends, and, you've talked about some of the, again, the leaner periods, and then sort of that tipping point, and things have really been strong. I mean, I guess just in terms of those market trends, I the first time I had you on the show, I know I asked you about this, the effect of the adaptations, the movies and the TV shows. I mean, how much of a fire has that lit in the back issue market?
I think it's been very substantial. There's two things going on. One is you have all these viewers watching the movies, and then they're at the very least they're curious about the comic books. They're not all converting to reading comic books because that reading comic books it's not something that appeals to most people for whatever reason. But it did bring in a bunch of new people that are at the very least trying out comics, and then a few of them it sticks, right? The other thing where it really lit a fire under back issues in a big way is there's this whole trend where the first appearances of these characters blow up in the aftermarket, where, when they announced that Avengers is Age of Ultron a couple years ago, all of a sudden Avengers 55 becomes a $300 comic when it was only a $30 comic, and I can name a million of them. So I really believe that that's thrown a lot of fuel in the fire. I don't know, what percentage that versus just there's a general trend towards people a lot of people that have money are putting it into hard assets. They want to collect things. It's funny because the stock market's been on such a tear the past few years. It's been great, but there's so much money flying into other kinds of assets, like, whether it's art, comic books, even coins, which I don't do coins, but from what I understand, the coin market has picked up, and the old baseball card market has picked up. Old, not the 80s, 90s stuff. So the point is there's a trend of money flowing into assets, which you could attribute to low interest rates, or there's just too much money flying around in America. I don't know. And there's the movies and TVs have been huge. Yes.
When there's an uptick because of an adaptation, does that last, or is it a momentary spike and then it goes back down?
Well, my rule of thumb is, and again, there's always exceptions, right? But my rule of thumb is you sell right before the movie. You sell into it. So, for example, now, again, there's exceptions because I'm pretty sure that Black Panther, Fantastic Four 52, I would have predicted the prices would kind of flatline or dip a little bit now that the movie hits. Like, usually all the price action is leading up to the movie. It's just like in the stock market. Usually you see the stock price, whether there's insider trading, who knows, but you see the price rising up to the good news. Then they announce the good news, and then it, flattens or dips. But there's always exceptions to that. So there's not just one answer, but in my opinion, the prudent thing is you sell into it. Like, let's say they announced in the next Hulk movie they're going to have Wendigo, and Hulk 162 triples. I would sell it now. I wouldn't wait for the movie to come out and then sell it. I would sell during all the hype leading up to it.
Right. No, that makes sense. So we've been recording for a while. The store is open on a Saturday morning. It's already bustling with activity.
Yes.
I have enjoyed our conversations so much. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with me or with listeners?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I will say I really enjoyed this, and I could do this forever because I just enjoy talking comics. I will say if they have a comic book collection and they want to get an offer, a fair, competitive offer, I'm always buying. And if they have any Golden Age comics, even if they just have one and it's a good one, let me know because I really have to buy some Golden Age comics.
And what's the best way to get in contact with you?
The best way to get in touch is you can contact me directly at my cell phone, which is always on, 973-727-6171. Text or call me, and my email, ben@zapcomics.com, spelled just like how it sounds. You can reach me 24 hours a day. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Giving out your cell phone number.
I put it out everywhere.
It's dedicated, yeah.
Well, it's on our website, our store bags. I decided I'm not going to have a personal cell phone number. I want to hear about comic books at all times.
Well, you're serious about what you do. I have to say, through the podcast and documentary, I've been to a lot of stores, and they each have something that that makes them unique and that makes me want to spend time recording with them, filming them. But I have to say, and I'm not just saying this because, we're here and we're doing this.
Oh, please.
I truly, really admire you and what you've built here.
Thanks.
It's definitely an example that I always cite when I'm talking to people about a comic book store and about how it can be run well and effectively and efficiently.
Thanks.
So, I admire you and your whole staff and everything that you've built here. And, thank you so much for being part of this, being part of the podcast and the documentary. Thank you for having me be part of ZapCon. And, I appreciate all of it. And I'm sure
It's my
listeners have enjoyed getting this insight from you about your collection buying.
Well, it's really been a lot of fun. I enjoyed, and I'm very lucky. I know I've said this before in previous podcasts. I'm very lucky to be doing what I'm doing. I mean, selling comics ain't too bad.
So, this miniseries was a first. This was the only time so far in my podcasting journey where I've had one guest for 4 episodes in a row.
Very cool. Thank you.
So this was a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you once again to Ben. Our comic convention season of My Comic Shop History resumes in 2 weeks. So My Comic Shop History Season 4B kicks off very shortly. We're going to be getting back into our convention discussions. I hope you tune in for that. And until then, just keep punching. Buying books with Ben may be over, but more new podcasts await at the My Comic Shop History Patreon page. In addition to the series premiere of My Superfan History, today also marks the release of Part 4 of the After Show with SCO, featuring former Alternate Realities owner Steve Odo. So head on over to Patreon for My Superfan History and the After Show with SCO. Enjoy.